mind, please allow me now to introduce Dr. Lena Chan, a pioneering leader in urban biodiversity and nature-based solutions, to deliver the first featured address of the day. Now, as the former Senior Director of the International Biodiversity Conservation Division at Singapore's National Parks Board, Dr. Chan has been instrumental in shaping one of the world's most ambitious models for integrating biodiversity into urban planning. Her work demonstrates that building healthier, more sustainable cities is not only possible, it is essential. Through innovative strategies that blend ecological science, policy, and community engagement, she has helped reimagine urban environments as living systems which support both nature and human well-being. Today, Dr. Chan will be sharing her insights and experiences from decades of leading this work and the vital lessons they hold for cities around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's all give a warm welcome to Dr. Lena Chan to deliver her featured address on nurturing nature in our urban fabric, a blueprint for healthier, sustainable cities and lives.
Tuli yang teramat mulia, Raja Muda of Selangor, Tunku Amir Shah Ibni Sultan Sharafuddin Idris Shah Al-Haj, Datuk Sri Azmir Marikan, Group Managing Director and CEO of Sime Darby Property, members of the Board of Directors and Senior Management of Sime Darby Property, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, selamat pagi, 早晨, vanakkam, and good morning. I'm technologically challenged. Okay, we are embedded in nature. As Homo sapiens, we are intrinsically linked to nature, and biological extinction will hasten our extinction. I would like to echo what Dato said earlier, and that is, if people die, disappear from the planet, biodiversity will thrive. But if biodiversity disappears, humans cannot survive. Hence, it is important for us to actually be totally nurturing our biodiversity. Yeah. Now, in 2007, the UN Habitat actually announced that half of the world's population actually lives in urban areas. And in less than 20 years, we already hit this 55% of the world population living, and we're just increasing and increasing that, increasing in our urban areas. But we also find that our personal experiences and research have supported the fact that biodiversity is crucial for both human, physical, and mental health. Hence, it is absolutely important that we weave biodiversity into our daily lives. And it's not just desirable, but absolutely essential. I'm just going to show this slide very quickly to indicate that we spend a lot of time indoors. And there are two lessons that we pick from it. One, which means that we have to make our indoor buildings infrastructure green. And two, we want to get people outdoors because we want people to be healthier. And therefore, we need to do both, green our infrastructure as well as actually green outside so that we spend more time outside. Yeah. And you think, well, is there biodiversity in urban spaces? Contrary to common wisdom, cities actually harbor rich biodiversity. In fact, in 2010, we came up, the Secretariat of the CBD came up with a publication just showcasing, emphasizing the fact that cities can harbor rich biodiversity. Hence, we must reimagine our cities as nexus of biodiversity, applying nature-based solutions and other effective area-based conservation measures, and not just lock up our biodiversity in national parks, nature reserves. It should be everywhere. And urban ecosystems is actually now an accepted ecosystem in the IUCN system of ecosystems. Therefore, it's a recognized system, and there's great diversity there. Now, this was taken in Singapore, but I've taken pictures of even in, KL, everywhere around in Malaysia, that urban ecosystems, green ecosystems can exist. When I was driven here this morning, Jalan Istana, it's interesting to see how green and how multi-layered some of the planting of the roadscape is. So I think there are lots of things that have been done, but has also been carried out, yeah. So this is the biodiversity that you actually can see around it's in the urban area. You can see woodpeckers, you can see, sunbirds and tailor birds, lots of them, even hornbills. And if you've been to Singapore, Plaza Singapura, just outside the Istana, and it's as urban as you can get. Somebody sitting in a bus stop would see hornbills flying across. So you can see biodiversity even in a very densely populated city like Singapore, even otters. So we need to coexist. It's not human-wildlife conflict, it's human-wildlife interaction. And we need to then see how they were here first before us. So how do we actually then live with them and then coexist? First, this is not some special house. It's a house in a neighborhood. And you just see green. People don't need incentives. People just realize that I want greenery in where I live. And therefore, this house has rooftop garden. And that it's not just one house. It's actually quite a few houses. And plus, this is a photo taken out of my daughter's bedroom. And it shows actually streetscape. You can look out of a house, and right next to it, here, this is actually next to a park. And Singapore has set a target that 100% of the residents of Singapore would be within 400 meters or 10 minutes walk from greenery or a park. And it started off actually as a kind of a target for an aging population, people with white hair like mine. And so what happened is that it then turned out to be an absolutely godsend during COVID, because people couldn't go to shopping malls and all that, and we tried to discourage them from going into the big parks because it means driving there. So you have a park just 10 minutes away from where you live. So that is actually very essential, and it was actually a good way of actually people enjoying and making sure that they are psychologically, well during that time of COVID. And first of all, how do we go about doing it? It's not something that is actually unreachable, because everything I show you now is not Photoshop. It's part of the road that Singapore has embarked on, transforming it into a city in nature. It used to be a garden city, which meant that there were gardens all around, and that's very manicured. Then later, we found that in NParks, we found that we were doing more than just having gardens around. So we then rebranded ourselves as City in a Garden, which meant that you open the door and then you're in a garden. But later, we realized that what we are doing, it's not just horticultural, manicured, clean parks that we need. We needed real nature, natural environment. So we then are transforming ourselves to a city in nature where nature and people coexist and not be against each other. So I think that's extremely important. So how do we go about doing it? Some simple steps. First, we have to extend our natural capital, which means that identify where our natural capital is, natural ecosystems are, and then make sure that we try and conserve them. So even in Singapore, we have actually primary rainforests, and sometimes people do criticize and say, hey, Singapore, you know, you're destroying your natural environment. I like to blame it on the British, actually, because in 1930, we were already quite devoid of some of our natural ecosystems. So we actually have to then start reclaiming, restoring it. So, and for those of you who've been to Singapore, you might not know it. You might have visited the Singapore Botanic Gardens. But the Singapore Botanic Gardens has a 6-hectare tropical rainforest, primary rainforest, because it has never been cut before. And it's interesting that within 10 minutes away from Orchard Road, you can visit a primary rainforest. And so we have to go about it instead of lamenting and saying, we've destroyed our natural ecosystems. Why don't we do something about it? So we came up with this handbook on habitat restoration. A lot of things we have to pay in Singapore. But in this case, you can actually download it from NParks website, and it's for free. And this, I made a special attempt to actually compile case studies of habitat restoration of all types. Primary forests, secondary forests, small patches, even marine. So it crosses a range of ecosystems that are being restored. And two, they're big projects, they're small projects. So there's nothing such as too small. It's always just the right size. But you need to actually have a range of ecosystems, because like some of you like to eat, nasi lemak, some of you like to eat, Indian food or Chinese food. So you need that kind of a habitat, different habitats for different nature, different biodiversity. Therefore, it is important for us to ensure that we just don't restore primary rainforests, but also all the other kinds of ecosystems, even grassland. So this handbook actually lists down plants to plant, and you need monitoring because you need to make that comparison. What was it like before and after the restoration? Is it better? Can we do it better? So that's very important. Now I'm going to show you some of the cases. So this is actually Bishan. So we have to intensify nature in parks and gardens. So this is Bishan Amokyo Park, talking about property. Everybody would just say, right next to it is actually HDB flats, Housing Development Board flats, government subsidized housing. And because it's so pleasant, and I'm just going to show you now very quickly here, on this side here, it used to be a drain, big longkang. And the thing that it does here with this longkang, the only thing it does is actually drain away flood waters. But with this restored river system, you now have so many different ecosystem services for free, note for free. So one, it not only does flood amelioration, but what is actually more worrying is actually droughts, because it's so much more difficult to control droughts. So, but with a natural ecosystem like that, right, water is actually stored in the ground. So you then, wildlife can still thrive. So you have flood amelioration, you have actually drought, a reduction of drought effects, habitats for wildlife, education, recreation. So there are tons of like 10 more other free ecosystems provided by just actually restoring from this infrastructure that provides only one function to like multiple free ecosystems. So that's actually very important. So residents elsewhere would say, can you please can you make another Bishan Amokyo Park around, and property prices actually increases. And it was quite interesting because I saw a woman and she was just standing there, right? Because there are stepping stones, she was standing right there and she was just breathing in and out. I said, what are you doing? She says, I just love to listen to the flow of water. And that actually says so much because natural ecosystems provide the sounds and activate all our senses. And I think that's very important in an urban environment that we live in, yeah. So, whoops. This is actually in the Singapore Botanic Gardens. And in 2009, there was major flooding. So came two reasons why we came up with this restoration of wetlands in the Singapore Botanic Gardens. One, because there used to be actually a river, and again, in the Singapore Botanic Gardens, there are several lakes. The oldest lake is actually the Swan Lake, and it used to be fed by actually rivers, river. But then it disappeared after some time. So now, we decided that we needed actually to recreate that wetlands there. So works was done to actually create this wetlands. It's fantastic because then we also have islands where there are orchids. The Grammatophyllum, the tiger orchid, one of the largest orchid in the world, patches of it. And it's great because next to this wetlands is also a restored forest, learning forest. We call it a learning forest because there's also a canopy walk. And many of us walk through the forest but don't realize that there's a whole new world up there in the canopy, and you see very different things. So we actually have this learning forest that juxtaposes the wetlands with forest, native plants, and there's a sense of history because there is a broad walk there that actually lists all the plants that are named after famous botanists related to actually or associated with the Singapore Botanic Gardens like Holtham, Ridley, Cantley, and all. So there's a sense of history, ecology, and this great immersement of experience of nature and history. This is actually the Jurong Lake Gardens. And Jurong Lake Gardens is interesting because a system that we try to recreate here is freshwater swamp. Singapore used to be full of freshwater swamps, but because of, in the name of development, the freshwater swamps actually were converted to an industrial site. But we not only created back this freshwater habitat, but also have boardwalks that allow people to walk through an immersive experience. It is not one where you're distant from the ecosystem. You are part of the ecosystem. So that's the Jurong Lake Gardens, and it's the number of birds there is just amazing, and there's actually a forest patch there. So you can see egress, you can see all sorts of buffy fish owl. So lots and lots of things to see. And there are several ecosystems. Again, I emphasize that it's important that we have a diversity of ecosystems there. Now, this was a former cemetery, Bidadari Park. And again, there are several ecosystems here. You have grassland, and we have intentionally kept. At one time, we used to mow down everything because it's so easy, flatten everything, So now we decided that we need these natural terrain. And then this is a secondary forest and wetlands. So it's quite amazing that what we did was this. In order for the Housing Development Board to actually build the houses, we actually literally have to, first of all, do surveys, find out which are the areas where is a high biodiversity and what biodiversity is there. So what we did was then found that this area here had lots of birds. And we actually translocated trees that we felt were of conservation value, and they're big trees, so we translocated it somewhere. But what we did was that we wanted to actually make it even better. So instead of just transplanting them back, we also studied the gilt. So which means that birds, we know that there are certain species of birds, but now we actually enrich it by saying, we could actually have more of this. Maybe we need actually trees that will attract other birds. And so hence, we actually enrich the biodiversity of that area so that there are actually more bird species. And because even though this is right in the center of Singapore, it's interesting that if you create the environment, it's not migratory birds not only thrive or move through mud flats, but they also fly through Singapore. So right center of Singapore. So this becomes a great respite. And we have found even the Amur paradise flycatcher. It's quite amazing. Lots of birds fly through it. So we felt, that it was important that we actually not only restore it, but enrich the environment that we have restored. And this is actually Kranji Marshes. It's about 150 acres, size of KL East, is it? Yeah. No, and for us, everything in Singapore is tiny, all right? But what is amazing about this part is, again, connectivity. How do we link up things? So Sungai Buloh is not very far from here. So Sungai Buloh has about 200 over species, 280 species of birds. And then Kranji Marshes is about 230 over species of birds. But between the two, when you combine them, connect them, you actually then, they represent a much better, diversity of birds. So that actually is another one. So do come and visit these places. We don't tell people a lot about it because we don't want to be overswarmed by tourists. But if you do come by, let me know. And we'll bring you to these places, these gems, that are really quite, you never think that, in Singapore you can have a lot of these nature parks and fascinating pieces. In fact, the Singapore Botanic Gardens has so many garden birds. It's the people in the know, what we call it bird tickers, would actually come to botanic gardens because there are so many species. You can see the mangrove peter and all the rest. Quite amazing again. Yeah. This is a 3.2 hectare plot. This is called the Hampstead Wetlands Reserve. It started off with being a problem. The contractors messed it up, and then it ended up with ponding, which meant that, the mosquito breeding. So instead, instead of we then decided we'll make a problem into a solution. So made it into a wetlands. And from like 4 species of birds that were seen around that area, now you have like 100 over species of birds. And every morning, you would find retirees, people, all bird watching with cameras and all, taking photographs. And you see fantastic, you can see hornbills, you can see buffy fish owl, you can see the bee eaters, quite amazing. So, doesn't have to be big, 3.2 hectares. And in Singapore, because we are so small, we just have to make the best of what we have. So always make a challenge or a problem the solution and look for it, because that's important. Yeah, so if property becomes an industry that could be a problem, why don't you take it as a challenge and see, how can you make it better? I'm sure you all can. So, that is not just in Singapore. The world was actually opening their eyes. So SDG Goal 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. So infrastructure built today should be future-proof for tomorrow. Not just think of today. It's for the future. And very important, investing. Investing in more blue and green spaces with high biodiversity in urban areas. And this will help biodiversity conservation and definitely reduce the negative impact of climate change. I remember the climate change where UNFCCC would have meetings, but they would always leave out biodiversity conservation. While in CBD, we're always trying to invite the UNFCCC because we realize that you have to engage the climate change people. So one year I was invited by IPBES and IPCC to actually come up with a report where we actually say that the main message was that climate change solutions might not be good for biodiversity loss or biodiversity conservation, but all biodiversity conservation solutions will be good for climate change. Therefore, we need to actually tackle the key thing, biodiversity loss, and ensure biodiversity conservation so that we can actually then down or reduce the impact of climate change. And it took the CBD signatories to come up finally with this Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, 4 years. And interestingly enough, there were so many targets. And in the end, it ended up with 23 targets. And interestingly enough, the one target that did not have any controversy, did not have any problems, that came in with what we call it a clean text, was actually decision, this was a decision called for engagement of, very important, subnationals, which meant that nations can't do it on their own. They have to actually then ground up subnationals and, very important, cities. But what I want to get at is Target 12 came in with clean text, and Target 12 states significantly increase the area, quality, and connectivity of access to and benefits from green and blue spaces in urban and densely populated areas sustainably. So nobody argued against it. So it's a target that all agree now to put to practice and operationalize it. I think that's extremely important. So I'm going to show you now examples again, how we can actually restore nature into urban landscape. Kampong Admiralty is actually, again, a HDB block for the old people, but actually for the more elderly. But what was interesting is when I visited it, I found actually what was interesting was they had kindergartens, childcare, and clinics for kids. So I said, why is that so? And they said, oh, that's because the parents would bring the kids and get the grandparents to look after it. So what I'm trying to get at is, when you have greenery, you should also think of the social aspect of buildings, and that is encouraging actually the family bonding. And that is all part of actually this whole equity and biodiversity, yeah. So that's Kampong Admiralty. And they have little nooks and corners for people to actually sit down and enjoy. And then rooftop garden for people to actually plant vegetables. So urban agriculture is also getting very popular now. So this is another HDB block, and you can see the architects are so with us now, and you can see that where we live, there's biophilic buildings. Where we study, this is actually a school, the Commonwealth Secondary School, and they have two ecosystems built into the school. One, it's like a orchard, a secondary forest, and they also have a wetlands. But what was interesting is, again, this is where education comes in. So in Singapore, they have what we call it the mother tongue. They have to study the mother tongue language. And what the teachers do would be, instead of having the mother tongue classes inside the class, they bring the children out, the students out into these natural ecosystems. So that's the other very important thing, that people have to be, they must learn the language of the vocabulary of biodiversity, and then infuse it into their whole system and into their daily lives. So that's very important. The kids now are great at looking after, the biodiversity. So all the students of this school, and the school teacher in charge is also a leader. And so what she said was that, what he said was that, let me now get the students in charge of biodiversity. And the kids are all well versed in biodiversity. One of my aspiration was, I said, I wish that every child in Singapore should be able to name 10 bird species, native bird species, 10 native trees, 10 native butterflies, and 10 dragonflies. And that's actually incorporating biodiversity into the school curriculum at all levels. And that's one of the targets of the Singapore Index on Cities Biodiversity, which I'll talk about soon. So that's education and restoring into all aspects of our lives. So this is actually a village called Enabling Village, and this is where you have quite a few NGOs that are housed in this building. So it's actually, again, very green and workplace, fantastic workplace, yeah. And very quickly, to show you the difference, it used to be like that, just grass, turf, boring, and it's quite next to the Buona Vista station. Just look, don't have to do very much. Don't have to do big projects. Plant trees, everybody's eating out. Everybody now takes lunch there. So, and then look at all the, plants, cool down the buildings, cool down the environment. Here, this patch here is now at connectivity. And it's not only great for connectivity, it was found that there's this rare butterfly, rare bees. So we not only know about our trees and our bird species, but we also know about our insects, because they are important part of the ecosystem. Fusionopolis, which is, technology, digitalization, media, but you have greenery too. So buildings are very important, yeah, to be green. Hotels. Park Royal. And I don't have a picture, but hospitals, Kutik Puat Hospital. The CEO of Kutik Puat Hospital said every bed in the hospital must face greenery. And he did, and then I told him, I said, hey, Mr. Liap, I'm going to stay in the hospital longer because it's so nice, Then he said, no, we'll get rid of you as soon as you're well. And it's true, he documented it, and they checked, and they found that the patients actually recover faster when they actually, see greenery. So that's very important too. So it's not only, hotels, schools, but also hospitals, and of course offices. So here, strengthen connectivity is extremely, because if you strengthen connectivity, it actually then allows larger spaces for wildlife. So in this case, we never imagined at one time that we could actually connect the segregated, fragmented Bukit Timah Nature Reserve from the Central Catchment Nature Reserve. And there are like 8 lanes, 4 lanes on each side. And again, this is where interdisciplinary, intersectorial collaboration comes in. Here, you need the Land Transport Authority, the Ministry of Defense, National Parks Board, the Building and Construction Authority, because they actually set the rules and regulations for buildings, and they've never had, gosh, you want a link across 4-lane highway? We don't have the standards, so then we have to come up with rules and regulations on how to actually then bear the weight of these trees. So what is actually quite interesting too is that you note that this was taken in 2023, and within less than 10 years, that biodiversity has just grown so well, and we have camera trapping, and actually we can see animals crossing. So that's very important. And we did the surveys as well as post-development surveys to document it. And what is important is, in the tropics, you stick a stick and it will grow by itself, because there's rain, there's water, and there's sunlight. So that's fantastic. So that's the eco-link that we have. And that's the Bukit Timah Expressway that it goes across. Yep. Now, many cities can actually emulate that of a garden city, can become a garden city. Very few can actually emulate that of streetscape planting. And we came up with this nature-based solution. What can we learn from nature? Tropical rainforest has thrived for so many years, millions of years. So what can we learn from them? Multi-layered, planting is extremely important. And so what we had then introduced, because 11% of Singapore are roads, and we used to have roads that are very nice Paris Boulevard type, same species, all neatly manicured, lined up. But we thought we need something more than that. So with this multi-layer planting, interspersed between those old trees, you have different species, different heights, and it's great for climate change, because with climate change, you're going to have heavy rainstorms. They hit the first layer, the upper layer, canopy, drop to the second, mid-canopy, energy reduced, drop further reduction. So then, by the time it reaches the ground, all the energy from the heavy rainfall has reduced. There's less soil erosion. With more and more trees planted in between, you find that there are actually larger leaf surface area, which means that it allows for more photosynthesis, more carbon sequestration, and release of oxygen. And then we always say that it's very important with oxygen, and you talk about economics and all that. And I keep asking people, when you go to the hospital, how much do you have to pay for oxygen? A lot, right? Here, what do we have? Breathe in, breathe out. The trees are actually giving out oxygen for you. That is not taken into account in our economics and ecosystem services, what they provide, because for free, but note. So now in Singapore, we are just getting more and more of these streets now planted with multi-layering, and because you have different species, different layers, they actually provide many different ecosystems for different species. And it's just fantastic. So besides your nature parks, nature reserves, national parks, you actually then can see and use your roadside planting and parks for biodiversity. So make use of every bit. And then the other thing is, one thing is, we're also very aware of the aging population. So like aging trees. After like 50, 60 years, we were all planted, same age, they're all going to go. So what do? Botak out the roads, not right? So what we do is, because of this multi-layered planting, these trees will actually grow up. So there'll be seamless, very nice seamless transition of roadside planting. So that's actually, it was actually a bonus that we didn't realize at that time, yeah. Everybody has a role. Everybody must play. And we get the community, the industry, everybody. And I've always thought, too, that it's quite interesting because when we go to work, we wear the hat of playing the role. This is what we need to do for our company. You go back home, you're a parent, you're a child, whatever, you think differently. Why is this dichotomy? We have to think that if you're in industry, you must also think like a parent, long-term, intergenerational, and change mindsets, paradigm change. So we should think of businesses as we would think of a parent, more nurturing. So after doing all that, we need a tool actually to measure how well our biodiversity conservation efforts in cities have succeeded. So this is a monitoring tool. Again, you can download this. And this one was actually, even though it's called the Singapore Index, it's actually developed in cooperation with the Secretary of the CBD and Global Partnership and Local and Subnational Action for Biodiversity. It's a self-assessment tool. We purposely make it a self-assessment tool because if you have other people do it for you, you will not implement it. So it's better that you do the self-assessment and then you will then apply it and operationalize it. And there are three components very quickly. What native biodiversity, what do you have around? So this native biodiversity, if they have native biodiversity, what ecosystem services do they provide? And if they provide good ecosystems, how are you governing and looking after it? So there are 28 indicators, and we also provide how to do it. So the question then is, what is the rationale behind it? Why did we select that indicator? How to calculate it? Where to get data for your calculation? And the basis of scoring. We wanted a quantitative score because if you have this traffic light one, everybody will argue, I think you've done not very well, you've done very well. No, forget it. Let's get down and do quantitative score. So we actually calculate, we actually come up with a basis for scoring quantitatively. And there are more than, even though on this map it shows about like 40 over cities, but I was really surprised when you look at it, there are like hundreds of cities that have done it, except that they didn't report it. So there are cities in Japan, cities all over the world. And recently I published a paper in the Transactions of the Philosophical Society. Yeah. And what basically, I selected 11 cities that have actually applied the Singapore Index. And they range from northmost Edmonton, southmost Auckland, and then in South America, in every continent, cities have actually applied. So there are small cities, there are large cities like Sao Paulo and Hyderabad, and there are small cities like Victoria Gusties. So a range of them, and all have very nice success stories to tell. Yeah. So the uniqueness of the SI and the diverse application is that it's a comprehensive biodiversity index, and it's quantitative score, easy to apply, nature-based solution. You've got a handbook to actually guide you. And then it's aspirational, which means that you've got to actually aim for the sky. And then next, engagement, a network of diverse stakeholders, right from little children to corporates. There are diverse applications, master planning of cities, decision-making resource, which is actually the worst indicators that you've got, the section, then work on it, yeah. And guidelines on how to enhance biodiversity into, basis of calculation of economic value, and a biodiversity component of other indices. So, the key message is, biodiversity conservation is essential for development if we value nature as an asset more realistically. We must plan our growth based on long-term, intergenerational considerations. So the youth must come in as a partner, not as an afterthought. Yeah. And how to do it with AI, active innovation, and of course, artificial intelligence. But I think it's important, active innovation. So, conserve first, restore, ecologically connect, apply science and technology, total involvement of everyone, evaluate and monitor, create. So, we need to go from ground observations leading to appropriate research, frame the right research questions, translate results into policy, and operationalize policies, guidelines, and then follow up with evaluation and monitoring. So I think it's very important. I would like now, just very quickly, I went for a site visit yesterday, KL East. It was mind-boggling. I think the team from Sime Darby probably put stickers around such that I could see the dusky leaf monkey. I heard bird calls. I saw so many interesting insects. It was just absolutely wonderful. And it just shows that there is actually rich biodiversity around. And what I would like to leave as a final challenge to you all is, how can every one of you in this room leave this conference with the thought, how can we do our part in conserving biodiversity, restoring biodiversity into our lives? And I think, I hope that, do give it serious thought, because you can do it at all levels. Yeah, I'd like to thank Sime Darby for kindly inviting me for this session. And it was, for me, great, because to hear that message that Dato gave, it resonated so well with me. And, it's great to be able to interact with like-minded people, because it's important. We need to do that together. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I took longer than expected. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lena. Would you kindly move to the center
yeah,
for a
yeah.
very quick photograph as we conclude the session? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for all the questions that did come in, but in cognizance of the time that we have available, please feel free to approach Dr. Lena throughout the day as she will be with us, and you may speak to her directly.